make a start there. So yes, so Sarah, if you can keep an eye on the waiting room, just let anyone in if they arrive. So we've got quite a few people already joined. So thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. I was basically asked, it's one of the, so my name is Gareth John, for any of you that haven't come across me in the past. I'm one of the founders and one of the directors of First Intuition. I've been training accountants. In fact, I worked out, I think it's my 25-year anniversary coming up in March. So hopefully I'll be able to have some kind of celebration at that point. Quarter of a century sounds like an awfully long time to be doing the same job, but actually I still absolutely love what I do. One of the big changes I've seen over the last, particularly the last 4 or 5 years, some of you may well be familiar with the introduction of apprenticeship standards. There's been a big shift in the role of apprenticeships within a lot of careers, a lot of qualifications, but particularly in terms of accountants that I train. I know there are some accountants on the call. Got Ali, got Nick, I can see already. I think Tim, I think you're an accountant, aren't you, as well? But I suspect there's probably some who aren't accountants, but we've seen a big growth in apprenticeships in accountancy over the last few years. One of the things I love about that actually is it gives you an opportunity to help our learners develop more broadly than just the technical skills of being an accountant. You know, the sort of wider skills and behaviours that actually we now incorporate into our programs, and you know, develop our learners in, you know, stuff like communication skills, things like critical thinking, adaptability, which I think has probably been highly useful in the last 6 months, even leadership. And you know, as part of that, actually one of my colleagues, Amy, just asked me, given I'm like the granddad of the organisation now, I think, she asked me to just give a few thoughts on career success. You know, what were my views on what leads to successful careers? So, you know, I thought I'd run a session like this. I know we've got some of our learners on the call. We've got, you know, some former students on the call. We've got some people who aren't even accountants on the call. So, you know, this isn't specifically around accountancy at all. So hopefully there'll be something for everyone. I would hasten to add to start with, though, that these are very much my views. They're my views. I mean, you know, I've been training accountants for 25 years, so I've seen a lot of my former students go on to, you know, various successful careers. One of the things I love about LinkedIn actually is the ability to kind of stalk former students and tabs on what they're doing in their careers, see them going on to, you know, managing partners or CFOs or directors of finance in the NHS. And so I've seen, you know, literally thousands and thousands of accountancy students go on to great finance careers. You know, I've seen my own friends and colleagues go on to, I've got a very close friend who's a very senior policeman. He's probably in, you know, the top 10 policemen in the UK now. You know, I've got friends who are very senior merchant bankers, friends who are successful in the charity sector. And I'm fascinated personally with the concept of success. And I often, you know, over a beer or over a glass of wine, I like to kind of quiz people about what they feel has led to their own success, because what I've found over particularly the last few years, is the things that people talk about attributing to their own success are rarely the things I would have thought of back in my own 20s or early 30s when I was really getting started in my own career. So actually, you know, my subtitle for this presentation is what I wish I'd known 20 years ago. You know, the things I've almost had to work out for myself or through conversations with others, in terms of kind of leading to success. Because actually, I mean, if I go back to this idea of my own students going on to success, actually, let's, you know, it'd be great to have a little bit of interaction. I don't know if any of you have found the, you know, the various buttons that you can use, but I don't know if any of you have found the little thumbs up or clapping hand signs. It's always good to have a little bit of interaction through Zoom. But, you know, do you think that the students that I've seen go on to the greatest success, do you think they're the ones who got the best marks when they were doing their accountancy exams, the ones that then go on to the greatest success? Well, not at all. You know, in fact, sometimes the students who get the best marks in their exams, well, you can imagine people who are highly intelligent perhaps sometimes struggle with interpersonal skills. So, you know, I find it always very interesting that the people that achieve great success aren't necessarily the ones you would consider to be most academically brilliant, or you know, even the ones, you know, I've had plenty of students who've gone on to great success who, to be honest, I barely remember from being in the classroom. They didn't really stand out at all. So, you know, certainly I think, you know, academic ability, exam ability is no indicator at all of, you know, people's likely success. And kind of what I've come to think over the years is actually success is as much a mindset as anything, to be honest. I mean, success is kind of a way of thinking. I think success is a lot about the habits that you adopt and the habits you implement. You know, fundamentally, I think success is a choice. You know, you can actually choose to be successful or not by implementing, I think, some of the characteristics which hopefully I'm going to shed a little bit of light on in this session. Remember, these are just my ideas from, you know, a number of years of experience and conversations. I'll be interested, you know, feel free as I'm rambling on over the next sort of 40 minutes or so, feel free to comment in the chat box if you think anything I'm saying resonates, or if you think it's nonsense, or if you've got your own ideas and own interpretations. I'm always interested to sort of hear kind of other people's views on these sorts of things. But I do think, and I'm a big believer, that much of your life is about what goes on in here. You know, it's about your mindset, it's about the way you talk to yourself, and it's about the decisions you make on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, to me, success is actually more a choice of, you know, do you choose to use, you know, some of these, you know, some of these characteristics, some of these things that I'll perhaps talk about in this session. Now, as I said, I've been teaching for a lot of years, and I do have a tendency to ramble. I'm sure some of you, such as Ali, will probably remember very well that I can, you know, drift off into various tangents. So I have put together a little presentation, more for me, if I'm honest, than for you, just to keep me on track of what I want to talk about. As I said, I'm recording this session, and I will send it out to everyone who's registered. So, you know, if you want to kind of come back and refer to anything, you'll be able to. But actually, I think before thinking about how to achieve success, it's actually pretty important to work out what you think success actually even means. You know, what does success look like for you? Because it's not going to be the same for everyone. And in fact, you can probably imagine that your vision of success will probably change over your life, probably change over your career. Mine certainly has. So whilst, you know, I am talking about this in the sense of career success, I think the stuff I'm talking about is equally applicable to other arenas of your life. So, you know, you've almost got to start thinking about, you know, what does success look like for you? You know, it could be around your career. I remember when I was in my 20s, you know, I was very keen on getting promoted regularly through, you know, my career chain. It could be about wealth. You know, I've got to the age now where I don't necessarily think that wealth is a particularly important thing in life. Certainly doesn't lead to happiness. I know plenty of very wealthy people who are not remotely happy. Could be around family, could be around friends, could be more sporting, you know, charity giving, could be raising money. So the various aspects. I think it's important you do identify for yourself what actually does that success look like. And it kind of reminds me back to, you know, many years ago when I was qualifying as an accountant. At the time, I think at the time I just received my final accountancy exam. So I qualified as a chartered accountant, you know, back in the 1990s it was now, and I just received my final mark, my final results. I qualified as an accountant, and I remember I got a text message. I heard a text message come through. It was from my girlfriend at the time, who is actually now my wife and mother of my daughters. And a very simple message from her saying, "What do you want from life?" Now, it was quite a big question to be asked, and it did sort of stop me in my tracks slightly, because what I suddenly realized was, so I just qualified as an accountant, and I suddenly realized that actually most of my life, I felt like I'd been on this kind of conveyor belt, you know, predominantly an educational conveyor belt, where I'd gone through school. You know, I went to school in Scotland. So I did O-levels, I did what were called hires at the time up in Scotland. You know, I went to college, I went to university, I went into a career. I was an auditor, worked for Coopers and Lybrand, you know, now part of the PwC empire. Qualified as an audit, you know, qualified as an accountant. And what I suddenly realized was I'd been on this kind of educational conveyor belt, always with my eye on the next step. So getting my O-levels, getting my hires, getting my degree, getting my accountancy qualification. And that had, you know, all gone very successfully, but I'd never really thought about where it was ultimately taking me. I never really thought further than the next single step in that journey. And you know, when I qualified as an accountant, and I'm sure this might be for some of the rest of you on the call, that was the last exams I ever did. You know, I did not want to do any more exams once I'd qualified as an accountant. And so all of a sudden that educational conveyor belt had stopped. And I didn't have a next step. I didn't almost have, right, what's the next thing to go to? And I suddenly realized, blimey, I've been doing all this work. I've been working really hard for all these years. I didn't actually know where it was taking me. And all of a sudden I had no next obvious step. And that question really brought me to a halt, thinking, blimey, what do I want from my life? Now, at the time I worked as an auditor. Now, I suspect there's some on the call who maybe do or have worked as auditors. And if I'm honest, I enjoyed being an auditor. It gave me a lot of exposure to different types of businesses, different types of sectors. I found a really good education in business and in commercial awareness. But I didn't really enjoy the process of auditing. I didn't really enjoy, I mean, this is in the day when you were ticking bank statements and checking invoices, and I didn't find it all that rewarding. I certainly could not see myself auditing for the rest of my career. In fact, I suddenly thought, well, the one bit of the job I do really enjoy is I've got to the point as a supervisor where I had staff that worked for me. I had juniors that would go on the jobs with me. And I really enjoyed kind of explaining to the juniors what their next task was or what little test they had to do. And I really liked that sort of mentoring process. And I'd also done a couple of internal training courses for Coopers at the time. And I'd really enjoyed kind of training people. And I suddenly thought, actually, you know, auditing, I don't think is for me long term, but I really enjoy kind of training, teaching people, and almost in this kind of inspirational moment, I thought, well, actually, maybe I could go into tutoring. You know, maybe I could actually take my accountancy skills, pass them on to other people who are coming through their own training. And actually, you know, obviously, I've now got a fairly successful 25-year career in teaching, you know, pretty much led by that one question, you know, what did I want from life? Because at that point I didn't really know. And all of a sudden it was almost a moment in my life when I thought, right, this is like a U-turn in what I'm probably going to do with my career. You know, it still strikes me looking back as quite an important moment in my life. Now my phone then rang again, and I got another message from my girlfriend. And it does scare me slightly to this day that my entire professional career was based on an autocorrect. But I do think it kind of raises an important point, because, you know, how many people make, you know, thousands and thousands of decisions every day about, I don't know, you know, how you're going to get to work, or, you know, what you're going to have for dinner, or what you're going to watch. You know, we make countless decisions every day. But how often do you actually think about those big, important decisions? Because I've seen plenty of people go through years and years of their careers, decades sometimes, without asking themselves those pretty fundamental questions like, what do you actually want from life? So I think, you know, first thing I would always suggest is make sure you do take the time to think, because particularly when you're busy, and I'm sure a lot of you like me have been really, really frantically busy over the last few months, you know, during lockdown and during, you know, coping with the pandemic. It's very easy to keep your head down, you know, like the hamster on the wheel, and never think about where you're ultimately trying to get to. So actually a little bit of homework for you. Here's a bit of homework for you, because this is an exercise I try and do every 2 or 3 years or so. Is that I'll grab myself a bottle of wine. This is a good one to do over a bottle of wine if you drink. But what I do is I imagine forward in the future, many, many, many years into the future. So imagine many years in the future, decades in the future. Imagine it's your funeral. So literally decades into the future. Imagine it's your funeral, and imagine your best friend is about to deliver your eulogy. They're about to give a talk about you, about who you were, about what you achieved, about what you stood for as a person. Write that eulogy for them. Write the eulogy you would like your best friend to deliver about you. And, you know, I think back, you know, my best friend, you know, my best man when I got married, Jace, who I trained with donkeys years ago. I've known him for well over half my life. And, you know, to imagine Jace stood at the front of a church next to my coffin saying, Gareth audited a number of small and medium-sized businesses across Yorkshire, wouldn't really fill me with huge amounts of inspiration and excitement. Whereas for him to stand there saying, Gareth helped thousands and thousands of aspiring finance leaders and accountants to start their careers and set them off on exciting journeys, that's something that actually I can get quite excited about. And so, you know, there's your first bit of homework. You know, and I do that every couple of years, every 2 or 3 years. Because as I said, I think your objectives in life sometimes change as you go through life. But just think about it. What would you like people to remember you for? But then you can try and set out and actually achieve that. So I think firstly, you've got to try and get a bit of an idea, what is, you know, what will success look like for you? Because that could be very different for different people. You know, it's one of the interesting things about the people I trained with. You know, I've got people who I trained with who are, you know, senior merchant bankers. There's a girl I trained with who's now a chief executive officer for a charity, spends most of her time in Africa, you know, bringing water to African villages. That must be phenomenally rewarding. You know, so whatever it is that success is for you, what I can now hopefully talk a little bit about is what actually then helps to pursue that success, whether it is career or wealth or charity or sports even. I hope a lot of what I'm talking about. We've actually got an AAT student who plays for the England Lionesses. And I'm sure she uses some of the same mindset habits with her studies as she does with her England training. Now, what will make the difference? I always think of success as an iceberg. Because you can imagine, I mean, I'm sure you would agree, it's easy to see the kind of visible, obvious trappings of success. You know, if you see somebody successful driving a, you know, flash car, or, you know, with a nice big corner office in the office, or, I don't know, going on the glamorous holidays, living in a big house, wearing expensive, you know, professional clothes, you know, the fancy watches, you know, it's kind of easy to see those visible trappings of success. What is always harder to see is everything underwater, you know, all those things that led to that success, you know, all the huge amounts of obviously effort, the time, the work that's gone into that. And this is really what I want to talk about in this session, really, is what I think lies beneath the water. What are the things that lead to those visible trappings, perhaps, of success? Now, I do know there's a few on the call who have studied accountancy. Some I taught accountancy, and in fact I teach, as some of you might remember, some of the business strategy type papers, and some of you will remember things like SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Some of you might remember PEST analysis, and I'm sure a lot of you will have, you know, when you were studying, you'll have learned your mnemonics and used your mnemonics, and I think everyone kind of loves a mnemonic. So I came up with a mnemonic, and the mnemonic is iceberg. Took me quite a while to actually get it to fit, but I managed, because I don't give up easily. So I'm going to take you through what I think are 7 key factors behind achieving career success. And again, you know, please feel free to use the chat box. You know, if any of you got any kind of comments, thoughts, opinions on anything I'm talking about, I'd be really interested to hear them. So let's start with the first of my 7 points, the I of iceberg, which is I am responsible. I think personally it's a bit of an issue. It's a kind of problem caused by our sort of academic system, and often I think a lot of people go through this in their early years. I don't know if any of you are like me, that when you were at school, when you were going through your kind of early years, your teens, a lot of the decisions in your life were probably not your decisions. You know, I did the subjects that I did at school because my teachers said they're the subjects that I should do, or my parents guided me. In fact, even becoming an accountant, I became an accountant because my mum and dad lived next to a couple of accountants who seemed to have a very glamorous lifestyle, and my parents literally thought, oh, that's something that Gareth should do. So they kind of steered me into accountancy. So I think there's a danger in your life, and particularly in your first couple of decades, a lot of what you do in life is not really your choices. You're kind of influenced or told or guided by teachers, by parents. I remember even in my early years at Cooper's as an auditor, I wasn't really making decisions. I was being told by my managers or my supervisors. And it's very easy in life to get into that habit of letting other people make your decisions, letting other people guide your career. And I think that's a dangerous position to put yourself in. because it isn't their life, it isn't their career, it's yours. And you can imagine, with the best will in the world, you know, my parents love me, very proud of me. My teachers, I'm sure, had my best interests at heart, but ultimately their objectives and their priorities were not the same as mine. And actually, you know, since I started taking more responsibility for my own career, I have started going in very different directions. You know, I remember when I told my dad that I was resigning from Cooper's to become a teacher. You know, it's not quite being a teacher at school, but it's a teacher. My dad was horrified that I was leaving, you know, Cooper's and Lybrand, what is now PwC, big global accountancy firm with a good secure job, to become a teacher. He was literally horrified. And actually, ironically, when I then left the big training company that I used to work for to set up First Intuition, again, he was horrified. It was like, well, you're leaving this safe job for a big company to go and set something up on your own. Why on earth would you do that? But it's because it was my objective, it was my vision. So I think firstly, you've got, I am responsible. It's your career, it's your life. Make sure it's your responsibility. Do not abdicate responsibility for your career to other people, because it's easy to do. A lot of people do it for many years in their lives. You know, the way I think of it is, in life, be a doer, not a doee. So you take action, you take responsibility, don't let things be done to you. You know, a lot of people, I've seen people my age, you know, equally far through their careers, who still let things be done to them. They let things happen to them. They take no responsibility for their own careers. Now, you know, I try and use this in all aspects of my life. You know, I like to take the initiative and to do things and to make my own decisions and to push things through, even if other people disagree. In fact, if I'm honest, often because other people disagree, I've got a slightly stubborn streak to me, which if other people tell me I can't do something, I'll just show them, frankly. But I'm a bit like this with networking. I mean, it's, you know, I think professional networking is very, very important in life. But I'm a horror for finding people who have no idea who I am. I'll find them on LinkedIn or somehow through social media. I'll introduce myself just out of thin air and say, oh, can I come and chat to you? And I remember I did this once. There was a guy, and this was fairly early on in my career. There's a guy who was a real legend in our industry. You know, he was a chief executive of one of the really big global providers. You know, done all sorts of stuff in the training industry. Was, you know, everyone knew him. He was really famous. I just messaged him on LinkedIn saying, "Oh, hi William. My name's Gareth. I'd really like to come and meet you." And I actually surprised. I didn't expect it, but he messaged me back saying, "Yeah, sure. You know, actually, I've heard of you," he said, which, you know, I'm quite impressed with. But, you know, he invited me down to his office on Cannon Street in London. And I remember, you know, getting the lift up, and then I checked in at reception, and his PA took me to sit outside his office, and I waited there. And then the door opened, and he invited me in, and it is the best office I've ever been in my life, I think. There's this huge, you know, corner office with, you know, 2 banks of windows overlooking, you know, the Thames and Tower Bridge and half of London. He had a massive, big, really cool-looking desk, and then there was enough space in the office for a whole, you know, suite of sofas on the other side. He invited me to come and sit down with him. I was thinking, oh, wow, you know, this guy's successful. You know, he had the whole trappings. You know, he had that tan, the nice watch. Sat down and looked at me and said, "Now, Gareth, I'm too old and rich to waste my time. What do you want?" Now, I thought that's a pretty bold opening gambit in a conversation, isn't it? And it put me on the back foot, but actually I was in with him for an hour and a half, so I obviously kept him interested with some stuff. But actually, you know, for me, I was so pleased that I had taken that responsibility, because there's no way on earth I'd have crossed paths with him by chance at a conference or something. I had to make that effort. In fact, there's a great example of this again recently. Some of you may have come across one of my colleagues, Nick Craggs. He manages our AAT distance learning business, which has grown enormously, and particularly in the last year, you can imagine distance learning is, you know, quite a big thing at the moment. You know, he's got 3,000 active students. He's won with that team. He's got a team of 15 or 16 now, and he's won, you know, various industry awards. They are literally the best distance learning team in the industry, and it all started with this tweet. Now you can see the date, 6 years ago, roughly 6.5 years ago. I tweeted him because I'd heard of him. Somebody I knew, a guy called David Hartley, had mentioned Nick, and I just thought, well, that sounds like somebody I should get to know. So that tweet led to us having a coffee in a bar in Leeds, and led to him joining First Intuition, and led to what is now the most successful AAT distance learning team in the UK, and I would suggest in the world. And only because I took the initiative to get in touch with them and suggest we went and had a meeting. You know, take that responsibility, I think, very seriously. I don't know if any of you like quotes. I'm a big fan of quotes. I love quotes. In fact, I collect them. I've sort of brought it down actually because I'm in the house. I can have all my props with me, but I don't know if you can read that. That's one of my little books. I collect quotes. I call them quotivation because they kind of motivate me. And when I'm feeling a bit down, I grab my book. In fact, I was just looking actually before we even started, so I break it down by topic and by themes. So there's quotes on positivity, there's quotes on listening to other people, quotes on success. Some nice ones here, you know, 3 things in life are important. The first is to be kind, the second is to be kind, and the third is to be kind. I quite like that one. So I love quotes, I collect them. And I think quotes are quite nice because they often encapsulate quite important life principles in a nice, neat, easy way to remember. They're often by celebrities, whether they're sports people or film stars or politicians, so they have that kind of cachet of celebrity with them. But there's a couple of quotes here which I quite like by rather different wartime leaders here. So Winston Churchill, I love this one, things don't happen to me, I happen to things. You know, very much the doer, not the doee. And Napoleon, hang circumstance, I create circumstance. And I'm a big believer in that. You know, do not wait for other people to create your world, your life, your career. Take that responsibility for yourself. So there we go. First, from me, I am responsible. Do make sure you take that responsibility very, very seriously. Second point, confidence and positivity. So another quote, I think, coming up. Now, I don't know, some of you may not be old enough to remember Carl Lewis. He was a very successful American sprinter, probably back in the 90s, maybe even the 80s. But great quote from Carl Lewis, without confidence, you'll always find a way not to win. Now, quite often when I do this sort of stuff, when I talk, because I love talking about the power of confidence, the power of positivity in your life. And I often get people who will stop me and say, oh yeah, that's all right for you, Gareth. You are confident. I'm not. You know, people will say I'm not very confident. You know, I don't have much self-belief. You know, I find it very difficult to push myself forward. And they then get very surprised to hear that I'm exactly the same. You know, I have huge self-confidence issues. I have huge self-doubt. You know, I have massive insecurities. I'm really, sometimes can be really horribly awkward in social situations. My idea of hell is walking into a room full of people I don't know. I just find that so stressful going into that situation, to the point where I'd rather just run away. Now, when I say this sort of stuff, people always say, no, that can't be right. But the thing is, I have learned over the years to mask that lack of confidence. I'm sure a lot of people would suggest I'm very, very confident, very self-assured. I'm not at all. I'm just very good at giving that opinion. Now, 2 points here I'll just raise. For those of you that do feel that lack of confidence, that insecurity, that self-doubt, there's actually a name for that that's so common. It's called the imposter syndrome. Now, if any of you, Google some of this stuff that I'm talking about, because there's loads of stuff online about the imposter syndrome. I love reading about the imposter syndrome. It's that feeling like you're kind of almost, I always feel like I'm in my dad's suit. I think, why are people paying me attention? Why are people listening to me? You know, I'm just this idiot that doesn't know anything. You know, it's classic imposter syndrome. And the thing is, imposter syndrome is very, very common. We'll talk about it actually a little bit later in the session. But I'm a big believer you can give the illusion of confidence. You know, it's not that difficult. It's almost like playing a role. In fact, I remember when I first set up my first Intuition office in Cambridge about 11, 12 years ago. It was the first time I set up my own business, first time I'd done any of that sort of stuff. So I did not know what I was doing at all. You know, when you incorporate a new company, they do not give you a guidebook on how to run a company, on how to build a company. You kind of have to make it up as you go along. And I had no, and I was in situations, I was trying to negotiate leases with big national landlords. I was trying to persuade, big employers like Deloitte, like the University of Cambridge, to trust me with their students. You know, I was trying to persuade people to give up jobs to come and work for me in a brand new business. So you can imagine, you know, you've got to give an illusion of confidence. And this quote here, you know, pretend to be completely in control and people will assume that you are. I took this role-playing thing to the absolute extreme. Like, I would always wear a suit, because I kind of figured, you know, I'm supposed to be a business person. Business people wear suits. So even when I was going around building sites, looking at potential venues for our office, everyone else would be in jeans and hobnail boots. I'd be in a suit, totally out of place, because it made me feel like a business person. I used to carry the Financial Times, you know, the pink paper. I used to carry that around with me. Didn't read it. I used to carry it around with me because it made me feel and look, I thought, like a business person. I used to talk in business person language, all the kind of nonsense I teach in the strategy papers. I'd spiel that out when I was talking to normal people. I even had a theme tune that I would play to myself on my way to meetings, because I felt so out of my depth. I needed to have something. And the theme tune is a really famous, and he nicked it. I had it first, I would hasten to add. You know the opening credits of The Apprentice, the Prokofiev. It's a Prokofiev track that goes dum 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 dum, which, you know, I've been playing that to myself for decades as a way of rousing myself and bringing myself up to a frame of mind to go into, you know, negotiations with 6 people who are twice my age, and I could go in there and I could hold my own because I played my music and I had my FT and I was playing this role, all bluff, but I was playing this role. And the thing is, and the great thing about playing a role like this, and the great thing about bluff, is as well as convincing everyone else you know what you're doing, do you know who else you end up convincing? You end up convincing yourself that you know what you're doing. Don't know if any of you have come across the expression fake it to make it. I love the concept of faking to make it. You know, by playing a role for such a long period, actually, you know, I was playing the role of a successful business person. And actually over time, I kind of convinced myself I was a successful business person. And then a few years later, actually, I seemed to have become a successful business person. So, you know, going back to that point about confidence, don't worry if you are not confident, if you have self-doubts. I do too. Just don't let them hold you back. That to me is the real key in life. And another thing around sort of confidence and positivity, I'm sure a lot of you will have heard the whole glasses half empty, glasses half full thing. You know, are you know, a bit of an optimist, a bit of a pessimist? Are you glasses half full, glasses half empty? I personally don't like that as an analogy, because, you know, to say somebody's glasses half empty, or they're a bit of a pessimist, they're, you know, a bit miserable, a bit negative, to me that then is sort of pigeonholing them as that's how they are. And actually, if you remember our first part of our iceberg, I'm responsible. So I'm responsible for myself in terms of whether I am positive or negative. And would you agree you can coach yourself in your own head to be positive? Or you can get yourself really down in the dumps depending on how you talk to yourself in your own head. So actually, the analogy I prefer, somebody told me this a few years ago and I love it. It's an old Native American legend. And it tells about the discussion between a young boy just coming of age and his grandfather, who's like the tribal elder. And the young boy says to the older man, you know, what is the secret of life? What's the secret of life? And the older man says, well, life is a battle inside each of us. Life is a battle between 2 wolves. One wolf is darkness, is evil, is hatred, is jealousy. The other wolf is light and goodness and hope and love and passion. And the young boy says, you know, a little bit scared of this idea, you know, this battle inside himself, that says, Grandad, which wolf wins? And the old man said, the wolf that wins is the wolf that you feed. And I actually get quite emotional even saying that story, because it means so much to me in my life. That voice in your head, is it just me? Do you all have that voice in your head that talks to you during the day? Because would you agree that voice can be your harshest critic in the world, but it can also be your biggest cheerleader, can't it? And that voice is you, and you control that voice. And I think, this positivity, it's a decision you make every single day, every hour, every minute of your life. It's a decision to be positive or not. And it's a decision you make consciously or unconsciously. And I think it's important to make it consciously, make that conscious decision to be positive and to, I think a lot of my colleagues hate me now because I've trained myself so much that even when something goes catastrophically wrong, I'll come to it with a smile and think, right, what have we learned? What's great about this? What can we improve? Where can we take this? And the thing is, that decision about your level of positivity, it affects everything else, I think. A lot of the other stuff I'll be talking about in this session, can you imagine it affects your self-belief and passion? If you're not positive, you can't really believe in yourself. Persistence, we're going to talk about in just a second. You can't be persistent if fundamentally you don't think things are going to go right. Bouncing back from failure. I talk extensively about failure. You cannot bounce back from failure if you don't fundamentally think things are going to work out for the best. And the thing is, there's often not much substance to it. Why are you so positive? I don't know. I just think things will work out for the best. And the thing is, they often do. And even if they don't, you'll learn something and move on. So positivity, do make that decision. Make sure that you are thinking positively, about everything that you approach in your life. And so next point, are you still with me? Have I still got some viewers out there? So third point, enjoy it, love it, be proud of it. I love this picture, actually. I picked up on the internet somewhere. Everyone wants to be successful until they see what it actually takes. Thing about success, it does. I mean, I'm a big believer, whether you're talking about career or sports or a marriage, if I can even get philosophical, success takes hard work. There's no getting away from it, unfortunately. The long hours, the sacrifice. I look back at my own career, the number of evenings I worked, the weekends I worked, the stress you go through, the fact things will go wrong. It's not always going to be, I'm a big believer, success is never linear. Success is never up, 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 up. At best, it's kind of very up and down. So you'll have setbacks and failures as much as you have successes. And the thing is, if it's going to be such hard work, I'm a big believer, you've got to fundamentally love what you do. Love what you do. Don't just do it for the sake of whatever you think you're going to achieve with it. I love what I do at work. In fact, I pulled out, I haven't used one for quite a while, funnily enough, but I pulled out one of my business cards. Some of you may even have had one from me over the years, but I pulled out one of my business cards. Now on my business card, it says that my job title is Executive Chairman and Director. Ooh, look at me, look at me. The thing is, that means nothing. That's meaningless, isn't it? Executive Chairman and Director, that means nothing. It's just a title on a business card. The thing is, in my head, I actually now view myself, I'm an entrepreneur. My role is I set up and establish new businesses, new programs, I build new teams. That's what I do, is I'm an entrepreneur. But actually, in my heart, I'm still a tutor, fundamentally. And in my heart, I don't teach all that often now, but I still, will sometimes help out students. I'll mark mocks, I'll go online and answer questions, because ultimately, that's what I get a real kick out of. And my view is, even if my business became a complete failure, I still fundamentally enjoyed what I did. I think you've got to be proud of what you do. To me, can you imagine, it's the journey that is just as important as where you get to. In fact, my point here about 3 words, is it's something it's become a bit of a thing in my head now, because I've come across it so often over the years. I have talked to lots of people who are literally at the absolute peak of their game, CEOs, managing partners, running big organizations, sports people, people raising tons of money for charity. I talked to, I don't know if any of you have heard of Catherine Granger, who, she was an Olympic rower. She's the one who famously won 3 silvers in a row at Olympics, and then finally at the London Olympics got her gold. It literally took her 16 years to get her gold. And when I talked to her, she said she stood on the Olympic podium with a gold medal around her neck, with her own national anthem playing in the background, and the 3 words that went across her mind, and I've heard this from other people over the years, was, "Is this it? Is this it? Is this what I've spent 16 years of my life getting towards?" And it's actually called the arrival fallacy. A lot of people think that when they arrive at a certain point, winning a medal or getting a promotion or getting the qualification, maybe qualifying, a lot of people think once they arrive at that point, everything will be fine, everything will be perfect, everything will be sorted. Feel like winning the lottery. I'll win the lottery and then everything will be fine. I'm sure you can imagine there's lots of people who've won the lottery and their lives are still a disaster. So that's kind of the arrival fallacy. And to me, actually, and this is what I've learned a long time ago, is the joy is in the journey. I love every day. They're sometimes hard, they're sometimes stressful, but I love every day of what I do, every week. And I've been doing it nearly 25 years. The joy's got to be in the journey. Don't set your hopes on getting to a certain target and then it'll all be fine. You've got to love the journey. Another couple of quotes there. Money's like seawater. The more we drink, the thirstier we become. I learned many, many years ago, money is really not the be all and end all at all. I think above a certain level of earning, it really makes very little difference. If you work just for the money, then you will never earn enough. On the other hand, if you're doing something you are proud of, the rest will take care of itself. Actually, Sarah Kendall, I quite like her. She's a stand-up comedian. I did a bit of stand-up comedy a few years ago. So fundamentally, do something you enjoy, do something you're proud of. Right, next point. How are we doing for time? So about 1:45, so another 50 minutes or so. Hopefully rattle through my other points. So be comfortable with uncertainty. This is where I get to show a nice little picture of, and I always like to think this is my younger daughter Phoebe, because it looks very much like her. It's not actually her, but it looks very much like her. Running through a meadow, they're catching butterflies. Now, I'm sure a lot of you will have experienced, when you're doing something unfamiliar, doing something a bit scary, gets the nerves going, you get that kind of butterflies in your stomach. Now, let's have a thing. Let's get some points on the chat box. When you get those butterflies in your stomach, what are the butterflies? What's that feeling that you get, or the hairs on your neck go up, or your mouth goes dry, or your breathing goes a bit shallow? What's causing that? Yep, nervousness, absolutely, Jamie. Well, nervousness, excitement, actually, because to me they're the same thing. They're actually caused by the same. What's going on in your body? What's going on in your body? Yeah, worry, I think, is just another word for excitement, to be honest. It's the same emotion, it's just how you interpret it. Fight or flight, yep, Aaron, absolutely. It's caused by adrenaline. Those butterflies, or it's adrenaline, it's your body's, we've got the mention there from Aaron of fight or flight. It's actually your body's natural physiological reaction to fight or flight. And what's the point of adrenaline? Exactly, Andy, it's what used to keep us alive, because the whole fight or flight thing, if you're going to fight the tiger, the saber-toothed tiger, the adrenaline makes you strong so you can fight as well as possible. But if you're going to fly, if you're going to run, the adrenaline means you can run really fast. Would you agree that feeling is your body preparing to perform at its best, keep you alive, either by fighting or by running? Yeah. So actually that feeling, and it's interesting the words used in the chat box there, because I've seen excitement, nervousness, anxiety, excitement again, worry, all for the same thing. Because I think it is for the same thing. It's all about how you mentally interpret that feeling. Like for some people, those butterflies are horrible worry and they'll run away and they won't want to do it at all. For other people, it's excitement. Because would you agree? It's the same feeling. If you're about to, I don't know, go and give a talk in front of 300 people, it's the same feeling as if you're about to get on a roller coaster, really, isn't it? It's that kind of nervousness that can be excitement. But actually, to me, it's all about training your brain on how you interpret it. I long ago learned to interpret those butterflies as being a very positive thing, because it means I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone. It means I'm doing something new, something exciting, something different. I many years ago learned to firstly accept uncertainty. If you want to, how many of you want to be doing the same thing as you're doing today in 20 years? I would imagine, hopefully none of you, hopefully you'll want to have moved on, developed in some way. Well, the only way to move on is to do new stuff, is get out of your comfort zone. You've got to accept uncertainty. In fact, I've learned to embrace uncertainty. I love those feeling of butterflies. They excite me now because I've trained my brain to recognize them as excitement, not as nerves, not as anxiety. And actually, I've got to the point now where I pursue uncertainty. I chase the butterflies. If I'm making a decision at work, if I'm making some kind of business decision about, setting up a new business or opening a new centre, if I don't get the butterflies, I generally won't do it. Because I kind of think, well, what's the point? If it doesn't excite me enough to get those butterflies going, why would I waste my time doing something that doesn't excite me? Which I've learned, and don't tell my senior board colleagues about this, because they think I make decisions in a rational manner, which I don't really, because they're kind of based on the butterflies. Does it excite me? Does it energize me? Is it going to help me develop? So, and I'm a big believer, this old cliche of do something that scares you every day. So if you're offered, if you're offered work you've never done before and you're a bit nervous of doing it, take it on, volunteer. Introduce yourself. If you manage to get some kind of networking, introduce yourself to people you've never met. I used to do this so much. I would introduce myself randomly to people on trains. Actually, it's amazing the kind of people or you get to know by stepping out of your comfort zones that way. Remember, recently I actually entered my first show jumping competition because my daughters both ride, and to scare myself, to push myself out of my comfort zone, I decided that I would start riding and do a show jumping competition, which scared the absolute life out of me. On this point actually, and we sort of referred to this earlier, this idea of feeling like a fraud, that people will find you out. This is classic imposter syndrome. And actually this idea of moving outside your comfort zone, would you agree, if you're moving out of your comfort zone, if you're doing new stuff, if you're experiencing uncertainty, you're bound to feel like an imposter. Actually, research has shown that generally successful people suffer from the imposter syndrome the most, because by definition they are pushing themselves out of their comfort zone. It'd be very easy to never be stressed, to never be in uncertainty, to never feel the imposter syndrome, just doing the same thing month in, month out. And I know people who've done that in their careers. It's the difference between 20 years of experience and 1 year of experience 20 times. And I've certainly seen people who've had the 1 year of experience 20 times because they don't really want to push themselves out of that comfort zone. Right, okay, it's over halfway there. Doing okay. So what about the E? And actually for me, and if you take one thing away from this, and if I take one thing away from this, which I will, this E is to me the most important: endless persistence. My daughters both went to the same nursery, and actually they're both at different ages. They came back home, obviously having been taught the same little rhyme, which they still say now: if you try, then you can. If you try, then you can. Which, it's obviously quite a nice little positive kind of affirmation message for them to be saying. The thing I really like about it is you have to try more than once, don't you? It's not if you try, you can. It's if you try, because it won't go right on the first one. In fact, that show jumping competition I mentioned, I nearly bottled it, because the horse I was going to ride was really big. There was like 8 fences. I suddenly thought, right, I'm going to get hurt here. And at my age, if I fall off a horse, something as serious is going to get hurt. And I nearly bottled it. And my daughter comes up to me and says to me, "But Daddy, if you try, then you can." And I thought, well, what can I say to that? So I just got on and had a go. Now, I didn't complete the round clear. I fell off once and I clattered through 2 fences, but I finished it. And I didn't hurt myself too badly. But for me, persistence is absolutely key, pretty much to everything in life. I remember when I was negotiating my first lease in Cambridge. It was a standard boilerplate lease contract from a big global landlord. They basically sent it over for me to sign it without asking any questions. I went back to them via my lawyer saying, well, I'd like these 10 amendments. My lawyer said, oh, no, this is a standard lease from this big landlord. They're not going to change things just for you. And I said, well, can you ask if they'll put through these 10 changes? And he goes off, comes back and said, well, actually, I'm surprised they've allowed you one of the changes. And I said, oh, well, that's fantastic. Well done. Can you go back to them now and ask for these 9 changes to the lease, please? And he said, well, no, I've already asked. They're not going to. I said, can you just go and ask for these 9? And he did. And he came back and said, actually, they've given you another 2. And I said, oh, brilliant. Can you go back to them and ask for these 7 changes in this? And literally like a dog with a bone. And I got it down to the very last one. So they'd given me 9 of the changes. They weren't moving on the last one. And I said to my lawyer, can you go back and just ask them if they'll put this tiny little change through? And I got all 10. because I guess they weren't used to somebody just coming back at them time and time again, like a dog with a bone. In fact, reminds me actually, because somebody once bought me, and I dug it out of my cupboard upstairs actually, somebody once bought me this t-shirt, and they bought me it as a bit of a Mickey take, and I think a little bit of a take the Mickey out of me. But actually, I'm quite proud of that, and I wear this when I'm going to the gym sometimes if I want to particularly lift some big weights. Yeah, for me, persistence is absolutely critical. I mean, I'm sure some of you will have heard the old story of Thomas Edison trying to invent the light bulb. Took him 10,000 attempts. I'm sure a lot of people would have given up way before 10,000 attempts. But as Thomas Edison said, when you have exhausted all of the possibilities, remember this, you haven't. I try and remember that when I'm doing kind of brainstorming and things like that with my teams at work. You know when you've spent half an hour brainstorming, you think you've run out of ideas. No. Have you really run out of ideas? So that's endless persistence. And then actually the close sister of endless persistence is resilience. Now, the thing about persistence is it's very easy to be persistent when everything's going well, everything's going positively. Much harder to be persistent when things are going wrong. And resilience is very much persistence in the face of adversity. You have to expect failure. There's another quote here some of you might have come across before by Winston Churchill. Success is the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm. Success is not avoiding failure at all. You've got to expect failure, expect criticism, conflict, opposition. I was gobsmacked over the years with the number of people who tried to stand in the way of what I was trying to achieve. And often the people I was least expecting to stand in the way, people who loved me. And in fact, can you imagine sometimes the obstruction comes out of the fact they love you and they don't want you to expose yourself to risky situations. I have a couple of quotes there. Do what you feel in your heart to be right. You'll be criticized anyway. There is one way to avoid criticism. Do nothing, say nothing, be nothing. Not kind of life I particularly want. In fact, I'll just mention the idea of failure because I think fear of failure is the thing that holds back the vast majority of people in their lives. I think if you want to achieve any measure of success in your career, you've got to expose yourself to the potential of failure. I've met Lord Carron and Billy Moria, who's founded Cobra Beer, quite a famous entrepreneur in the UK. But one of my favourite quotes from him: good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. Actually getting things wrong is the foundation of then ultimately getting them right. I don't know if any of you have watched that Netflix series in the last year or so that has the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan. And he was one of my childhood sporting heroes. I fancied myself as a basketball player at one point. This is a great quote by him around the number of times he's failed, and that is why he's successful. You know, the fact he has allowed himself to be exposed to potential failure. And again, I think it's a failing in our school system, that our school system does not actually prepare us terribly well for failure. You know, it celebrates success, it celebrates good results, it doesn't celebrate failure. Whereas in the real world, I think you've got to celebrate failure, because a lot of people think that the road in life is like we've got on the left-hand side there. A lot of people think that life is almost a binary choice, mutually exclusive of either you win or you fail. So if you fail, you have therefore not won. Whereas I think most people I talk to who've succeeded, success is almost in spite of failure. It's not the absence of failure. And you know, I love failure because every failure takes me one step closer to success, to, you know, making a breakthrough in whatever, you know, success, whatever career venture I'm looking at. And so that's resilience. So just to sort of flick forward to the final point, nearly at 2 o'clock, so final couple of minutes, goals and time management. See if anyone can give me a hand thumbs up or a clap on their reactions here. I'm guessing there's probably quite a lot of accountants on the call, particularly management accountants, who spend a lot of time at work drawing up budgets and forecasts. Now, for those of you on the call, how many of you would like to be a success in your life? See a few thumbs up already. I would imagine so. Probably unlikely you'd be attending this sort of presentation if you didn't. How many of you have got a rough idea of how you want to become a success? That's perhaps a slightly more challenging question. Because to be honest, when I was in my 20s, I had no idea I'd become a successful accountancy training provider. hadn't even crossed my mind at that point, but some of you might have a rough idea. More searching question then. How many of you actually write down specific targets for your own life in the same way you might do with budgets or forecasts at work? So I get a lot of accountants who they'll happily spend, you know, hours and hours, days and days doing organizational budgets, but they never actually write down targets for themselves. The reason I raise this point is going back a few years, Harvard University, where you can imagine they've got a pretty top quality caliber of people, they actually asked one of their graduating classes that final question: who writes down specific targets? And actually, even in their high caliber group, only 4% of them did write down their own targets. They then went back 30 years later to talk to those same people. Now, to be fair, they were looking at monetary wealth, which obviously, as we said, is not the be all and end all in life. But what they found is, from a pure wealth perspective, those 4% were worth more than the other 96% combined. Because when I heard that story, I started writing down my own little personal targets about what I want to achieve. I'm a big believer. Here's a quote from somebody you've probably come across in the news in the last year or two. Seems to be quite newsworthy, but I'm a big believer. If you're going to set goals, you might as well set big, bold, scary goals. I think it was Muhammad Ali who said, if your goals don't scare you, they're not big enough. And Donald Trump said, well, as long as you're going to be thinking anyway, you might as well think big. Now, he said that about 30 years ago. You can't fault him, as, you know, love him or hate him, and he does divide opinion, obviously. You can't fault his ambition, to be fair. But if you're not a big fan of Trump, you can always, there's another one by Nelson Mandela, said something quite similar, said, there's no passion to be found in playing small, in settling for a life less than the one you are capable of. So I'm a big believer in setting really big goals in life. I like to write down my goals. I like to review them regularly. I look back at them at least every month. I like to tell other people about my goals. I always think as soon as I've told somebody else what my goal is, I kind of have to do it. It's almost like I've shamed myself into doing it. But I sort of have this hierarchy where I'll have my big, bold, scary goals. I'll then break it down into more specific annual targets. What do I want to achieve over the next 12 months? I'll then have a monthly action plan. And then a little technique I learned a few years ago is write down 5 tasks you want to do each day the night before. Write down the night before so that when you wake up, you already know what you're going to be focusing on. And the other advantage of that, I think, is that overnight, your brain subconsciously sort of works on those 5 things you're going to try and do. It's amazing how when you wake up, you've already sort of half achieved 2 or 3 of them. Actually, this idea of breaking goals down, I just want to finish off one final little story last minute or so. I think you can literally achieve anything if you break it down enough. You can achieve the impossible by breaking it into lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of little possibles. I remember when we were trying to write a load of new material, we were trying to write 10,000 pages of material. It actually turned into a 3-year project. So big you almost couldn't get your head around it. So I broke it down into 1-hour chunks. You know, I'm going to write 3 pages of notes that hour, another 2 pages that hour. I'm going to, you know, write a couple of examples the next hour. I broke it right down, and I got inspiration from this from an athlete, a swimmer, a Canadian swimmer called John Neighbour. I suspect you probably haven't heard of him because he's back in the 1970s. Now, John Neighbour, in 1972, he went to the Olympics, but he only went as what they call a domestique, which is a term that's used in cycling as well. So he didn't compete. He was just there to help the better athletes. So he went to the 1972 Olympics and didn't even get wet, didn't even get in the pool. And he set himself a goal, a big, bold, scary goal of, in 1976, so 4 years later, he decided he wanted to compete. He wanted to get to the final, and he wanted to win the gold medal. That's a pretty challenging 4-year target, given he wasn't even in the pool in 1972. Now, actually, John had a little bit of a mathematical background. So what he did was he did a little bit of linear regression, and he looked at the sort of winning time trend over the last couple of decades, and he reckoned that to win in 1976, he was going to need to do his 100 meters in 55.5 seconds. Now, the biggest problem with that was his personal best at that point was 59.5 seconds, so 4 seconds adrift. Now, I'm sure you can appreciate in a race that short, 4 seconds is a lifetime. He might as well have finished the next day for all it mattered. And actually, he almost, looking at that massive chasm, he almost gave up. He almost retired from swimming and went and did something else, maybe maths. But actually, something about the numbers appealed to him. I think it might have been 4 seconds to get over 4 years. And he actually just started breaking it down. He figured, well, 4 seconds in 4 years, that's only 1 second each year. Now, over a typical Olympic training cycle, athletes tend to swim 100 days a year. So 1 second in a year is 0.01 seconds each day he's in the pool. Now, given it takes 0.3 seconds to blink, he only needs to improve by 1/30th of the time it takes you to blink each day. That sounds more achievable, doesn't it? And this was literally the mindset he achieved, was he broke it down and then he hit the pool and he started training. And can you imagine, he probably hit failure, he probably had problems, he might have had injuries and illness, but he persisted, he was resilient. And when the starting gun for the 1976 final went off, he was on the block, so he'd made his Olympic final. And when he finished, and I'm not joking about the time, you can check the records with this, when he finished 55.49 seconds later, he was the gold medalist, and that record stood for 7 years. And he nearly retired on the basis it seemed like an impossible target to achieve. And I love that story, and it kind of inspired me, as I've said, to break down a really mammoth, impossible target into lots and lots of little possibles. Well, that was my iceberg. So I hope that's been interesting. I hope that's got some thoughts going there. Thank you so much for your attention. We've run very slightly over time there. It's just 2:05. So thank you so much for your attention today. Just try and take down my screen sharing. But yeah, any comments you've got in the chat box, please feel free to stick them in. But thanks for your time and your attention. I hope that's been useful, and perhaps see a few of you in the future.